Okay, everybody, this is going to be the notes video for a couple of topics. Our first topic is actually organic foods. So that's where we're going to start. Let's see if I can actually type here. All right, so organic foods. So first of all, change that. Okay, organic, if you remember from previous units, it means carbon when we are talking about organic chemistry. So organic equals carbon when talking about organic chemistry, but not for foods. So you've probably seen the label organic on foods in the grocery store, or at least heard people talk about buying organic foods or growing organic foods, and that does not mean carbon. If it meant carbon, almost every single thing that you ate would be considered organic because everything that we eat has carbon in it, with the exception of maybe some minerals. Everything would be organic. Okay, so now we're going to talk about organic foods. Okay, here's a general definition. Produced by methods that foster natural cycles, produced by methods that foster natural cycles of resources, promote ecological balance, foster natural cycles of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. Conserve biodiversity. And so we're going to do some sub bullets here to just talk about what maybe some more details are with those three ideas in organic foods. Okay. Use of certain pesticides. And I'm going to put synthetic here. So use of certain pesticides, so synthetic pesticides and fertilizers are restricted in the farming of organic foods. So synthetic pesticides, synthetic fertilizers, synthetic herbicides, those things are going to be restricted or not allowed when you are farming organic foods. Growth hormones are restricted for animals. So organic doesn't always mean vegetables or fruits. It can also apply to meat. And if you are selling meat that you are labeling organic, that means that you were not using growth hormones in your animals. Foods cannot be processed with irradiation. Cannot be processed with irradiation. And what irradiation is, it's a way to kill microorganisms on the food. So to kill bacteria on the surface of the food, for example. So it can't be processed with irradiation. Industrial solvents. Okay, so again, solvents are things that dissolve, so it usually used to clean. So industrial solvents would be an industry synthetic solvent used to clean the crop. Okay, or synthetic food additives. Synthetic food additives. The USDA, so US is United States, and then DA is Department of Agriculture. So the USDA regulates foods that claim they are organic. Regulates foods that claim they are organic. In the US, there are 4 levels of organic labeling. And we're going to talk about each of these labels, and then I'm going to show you a little graphic that talks about them further. Okay. So first, 100% organic. And actually, I'm going to put that into quotation marks. So 100% organic would be the label that you would see on a product. And it means that all ingredients, all of them, are produced organically. And this excludes a couple of ingredients. For example, water. You don't produce water organically or not. You get water, you filter, you clean it, you use it. Salt is another thing. So like water and salt can be a part of your product and they aren't really produced organically. But we're talking about all plant and animal matter in the food was produced organically. A second label is just the word organic. And for that label, it means at least 95% or more of ingredients are organic. At least 95%. So that's a lot. That's almost all of it. Okay. Then the third one is made with organic ingredients. Made with organic ingredients. And what that one means is contains at least 70%, oops, at least 70% organic ingredients. And then the final level of the USDA labeling system for organic foods is part organic. And that one has at least 3 organic ingredients, but less than 70%. Obviously, you would want to, if you are an organic farmer or organic product producer, you want to label it with the highest level of organic as you can, because that's your market. People who want to buy organic are going to prefer things that are 100% organic instead of just part organic. Okay, so those are our 4 labels. And let's just look at one more word that you might see on products in the grocery store. Labels such as natural or all natural do not mean organic. And we're going to just look at a couple of graphics here to show the difference. So again, labels like natural or all natural do not mean organic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here and we're just going to look at a couple of things. Okay, so again, organic labels. Here they are. You've got 100% organic. Okay, it'll have the seal on it and everything in it is organic. No GMOs. We're going to do notes on GMOs in a minute, but everything in the processing and in the ingredients. All ingredients comply with the national list of allowed and prohibited substances, and there's certification required. So they are up to be, examined by the USDA, and they can have inspections, things like that. And then organic also gets to use the label. This one is 95%, and that is the biggest difference. The non-organic ingredients must also comply with a specific national list. Okay. Then these two don't actually get to put the USDA organic label on them. And again, this organic ingredients is also the part organic label that may have changed since 2018 here, but the organic seal can't be used on these. This one is at least 70%. No GMOs still, which we're going to talk about GMOs in a minute. And then non-organic ingredients apply with this list, still have a certification requirement. But then this one, really, organic ingredients means 3 organic ingredients or part organic. It does not actually have to mean much else. Okay, so definitely doesn't mean no GMOs or anything like that. Okay, organic versus natural. Again, natural does not mean the same thing as organic, and a lot of people kind of mix those up sometimes. Okay, so toxic, persistent pesticides. Now, this is an interesting line. This was made by the USDA, this chart. But we're going to talk about pesticides a little bit, but toxic, persistent pesticides, that's probably the key word, okay? Not allowed in organic produce, allowed in natural produce. Now, sometimes people say that organic doesn't use pesticides, and that's not true. Organic uses natural pesticides. And one thing that's different between the synthetic pesticides and the natural pesticides is how long they stay on the food. So the persistence, if you use organic, natural pesticides, they don't stay on the food as long. And so that's what this persistent word means. They're still toxic. They can be highly toxic, but they don't stay on the plant as long. Okay. GMOs, again, we're going to talk about those in a little bit. They're not allowed for organic. They are allowed for natural. Antibiotics, not allowed for organic. They are allowed for natural. Okay. So you can see that these are very, very different. As you go down, growth hormones, sludge and irradiation, animal welfare requirements, cows being on pasture for pasture season, lower levels of environmental pollution, audit trail from farm to table. This is like a way to trace where your food comes from all the way to the table. Certification requirements and inspections, legal restrictions, all of those things are present with the organic label. None of them are necessarily present for natural. So natural is a word that can just get thrown on to almost anything, and it doesn't actually have a whole lot of significance as far as regulations go. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to that one. Okay, so that is organic foods. Now we're just going to go and we're going to talk about some differences between organic and conventional foods. Okay, so backing out here, oops, differences, organic versus conventional, which means non-organic foods. And remember, again, we're thinking organic in terms of food language, not in terms of chemistry language. Okay, so currently there is no evidence that supports differences in taste. So not really a lot of research there. Okay, but let's talk about composition. So what's actually in the crops, okay, or the meat. So there are studies looking into differences in nutrients and chemical residues. Okay. There are studies that show differences in nutrition, in nutrient content. And studies that show no difference. So of course, you know, depending on who's funding a study, results can sometimes be skewed one way versus another, right? So you can find studies to show that the nutrient profile of a tomato that's organic versus a tomato that's not is different. You can show that. Or you can find a study that shows they're the same. And so we're going to just say the science on organic foods is young. Okay, it's young. It's not a lot of results. Not a lot of results yet. Lots of disagreement. Okay. One of the reasons why they have lots of disagreement too is many of them have confounding variables. You can't really tell what's causing the results. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to that other graphic. I just want to, again, one more time, just talk to you as consumers who will be buying food eventually in your life. And I want to just look at this one. So organic marketing versus the reality. And again, I'm not trying to push you one way or another, but I just want to show you kind of how they can play on words here. So if you've ever seen like organic advertisements, it wants you to believe that there's this huge difference between organic and non-organic. Okay, like you might see some advertisement for organic and you might see these kinds of things in there kind of making you feel like it's all natural and butterflies and rainbows, and non-organic is poison and torture and danger and all that, okay? But in reality, if we look at organic certification, it is excluding a lot of things. That doesn't necessarily mean those things are bad, but it does exclude a lot of things. Okay, so organic is a tiny percentage, and really this is too big of a circle. It says that down here. It's really only 1% of United States farming, but it excludes any farm that does crop rotation. IPM is I can't remember what the I stands for, but pest management. Now this is kind of a trying to manage pests before they get on the crops. It's kind of a system. Cover crops are things that you put down on your fields to save the soil throughout the non-growing season and kind of prevent erosion and keep nutrients there. And I'm not exactly sure why organic farming doesn't allow cover crops. I would have to research more. Pesticides, again, this is misleading. Organic does have pesticides. They are just natural pesticides, okay? And this is synthetic pesticides. Fertilizers, same thing. And then conservation tillage, right? So here's some more exclusions. So GMOs, many of which we use to reduce the pesticides that we use and reduce CO2 emissions. Okay, organic excludes antibiotics, which has pros and cons. Okay, pros being avoiding excess use, and cons is an incentive to delay or withhold treatment. And certain pesticides and fertilizers, but not based on necessarily on safety or environmental impact. It's just there's just a big push in the organic world that if it's man-made, it is more dangerous. And there's definitely a debate on that topic. Okay, so that is organic. Now we have seen this little topic pop up a ton, GMOs, and that's what our next set of notes is going to be. So I am going to give myself a new page here, and we're going to start the next subject. Okay, so GMOs is our next topic. I believe these are separate in your assignments, but you can put them on the same page and then submit the same picture twice if you'd like. Okay, so GMOs, if you don't already know what a GMO is, it is a genetically modified organism. And I'm going to add the S there. So genetically modified organisms. Okay, so let's just talk about that a little bit more. Did I spell that wrong? I did. I forgot the S. Okay. These are living organisms whose genetic material has been changed. Okay, living organisms whose genetic material has been changed in a laboratory through genetic engineering. Okay, so living organisms whose genetic material has been changed in a laboratory through genetic engineering. That's a pretty specific definition. Okay, so it has to have been changed in a laboratory through genetic engineering. So humans have specifically engineered the genes of a thing, of a crop or an animal or a bacterium to be different than what they were originally. Okay. Sometimes this is called living modified organisms. So you might see like LMO instead of GMO. Okay, but we're going to stick with GMO for this class. DNA of these organisms has been changed to make the plant or animal have a new trait. So we change the DNA in an organism to make that plant or animal, and actually I can even add or bacteria here, okay, to have a new trait. So I'm going to add that. You don't necessarily have to, but we are going to talk about an example of that. I'm going to put bacterium for a single bacteria. Okay, so DNA of these organisms has been changed to make the plant or animal or bacterium have a new trait. Okay, so what are these used for? So let me see here. Having issues. Let me see if I can get my bullet to go back out here. Okay. Uses of GMOs. Okay, sources of medicine. That is a major one. So we can get plants or bacteria to make medicines for us. So hopefully you guys have all heard of insulin. We have a lot of diabetics in our school, in our community, in our world that need insulin. So their bodies either are not producing it anymore or not producing enough, or they're not responding to it correctly. But anyway, insulin is a definite part of our system that we need in order to regulate blood sugar. Okay. And so sources of medicine is one use of GMOs. And I'm going to show you a graphic. You don't necessarily have to write more about this, but insulin is a great example of this. And so here's what we do. Okay. In our human cells, we have a gene somewhere in the nucleus on our DNA that creates a human insulin producing gene. So this is something that tells our cells to make insulin. Now, in the pancreas, that is where insulin is made. Sometimes this shuts down or some other piece of the process shuts down, but that gene is there. We take that gene and splice it out of a human cell. Then we take a little bacteria cell, and bacteria DNA is sometimes in a plasmid form. So it's in a little loop, a little circle, okay? And we can cut that circle open and insert the human DNA into it. And so now we have our bacteria DNA with a little tiny chunk of human DNA inserted. And this little piece of DNA says, make insulin. It tells the cell how to make insulin, okay? Then we put that DNA back inside the bacteria. Then the bacteria multiply, just like they always do. They spread, okay? And they become little factories for insulin. So they have this human gene in there that says, make insulin, make insulin. So they do, they make insulin. It doesn't hurt them to make insulin. It just, that's coded into their DNA now because we added it there. And that process happens lots and lots of times with lots and lots of bacteria. And then we pull the insulin out of that system, put it into a bottle, and then it's ready to be injected into the patient. Okay. Now, before we had bacteria making insulin for us, we had to use insulin from pigs. Okay. So we had to take the pancreas of a pig, remove the insulin from it, and use that as a substitute form of insulin for humans. And it wasn't great. It's not perfect because it wasn't human insulin. This one, even though it's made in a bacteria, it is human insulin because it comes from a piece of human DNA that says this is how to make human insulin. So this is a way to make human insulin in a petri dish instead of having to rely on pigs for insulin that was only so-so in doing the job inside our bodies. Okay, so that's one of the uses of GMOs. Okay, so here's another one. Scientific research. Okay, how can we change plants or animals to make them superior? Okay, so a lot of scientific research is done. Sometimes things are changed without really any reason. I mean, you can make certain plants or animals glow in the dark by putting a gene into them. Similar process to what I just showed you with the insulin, but putting a gene into them that comes from like a glowworm, okay? So you can make things glow that normally wouldn't glow. Now, why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but make them superior. If you want to make them superior in some way, a plant or an animal, you can do scientific research on that using genetic modification or genetic engineering. Okay, now genetically modified foods are the hot topic, and they're the piece in the organic world, okay, right? Organic means no GMOs, okay? And so that's part of what it means. So we're going to talk about what genetically modified foods can mean, okay? What it can mean. So it can mean pest or herbicide resistant crops, okay? So for example, let me just explain that further. An herbicide spray, herbicide means kills plants. Okay, that's what that means. Herb is plant and icide is to kill. So herbicide is kills plants, right? An herbicide spray will kill the weeds, but not the crop. Okay, that's the herbicide piece. The pest-resistant crops means you don't have to spray pesticides. Because the plant is already pest resistant. Okay, so pest and herbicide resistant crops. Herbicide resistant means the spray will kill the weeds, but not the crop. Pest resistant means you don't have to spray pesticides because the plant is already pest resistant. So lots of those will be talked about in this unit. Okay, disease resistant crops. Disease resistant crops. There are lots of diseases that attack plants. If you're not familiar with any of them, I mean, just to think about one thing that you probably eat, at least with some frequency, is a banana, okay? There are some different bacterial and fungal attacks on banana trees right now. And if we can genetically modify our banana trees to be resistant to those attacks, then we can save the banana, right? And so another example is corn. Let me just show you a picture here. So here you have a genetically modified corn crop here versus the one that wasn't, and this one has been ravaged here, okay? And so you can avoid stuff like this, whether it's from a pest or from a disease, by modifying the genetics of your crop. If you know what you're fighting against, you can help the crop fight it for itself, okay? So that's one example, disease resistance, okay? Improved nutrient profile for crops, improved nutrient profile for crops. So examples, higher protein grains. Okay, a lot of us love eating grains, but they don't have a lot of protein. And if you don't eat enough protein otherwise, then you could eat high protein grains and that would be beneficial to you, right? A higher vitamin, or mineral content in crops. Okay, and I'm going to show you a very specific example of that one. One of the vitamins that we need in order to help our eyesight and our development in general is vitamin A. Okay, we talked about vitamin A in our vitamins notes, but we'll talk about it a little bit more here. There are places in the world where they don't eat enough produce, and their main source of food is rice. And if you don't get enough produce with your rice, you don't have vitamin A. And if you don't have enough vitamin A as a child, you go blind. And so blindness is a problem in those countries that don't have a lot of produce to go with their rice. And there is a genetically modified solution for that. Let me see if I can find my picture. Okay, so this is the typical rice that would be grown in the Philippines, okay? And that is the major piece of many of their local diets, okay? And again, if the children in the rural areas do not have other things to go with their rice, they're staying alive on rice, but they can go blind. It's called vitamin A deficiency blindness. This right here is golden rice. Golden rice is genetically modified rice that contains vitamin A. And so now you don't necessarily have to add vegetables to get vitamin A into your children. You can just grow this rice instead of this one. It tastes the same, looks a little different, but it gives you that vitamin A and it can prevent blindness in children in those areas. So that's just one very specific example, but there are many examples of where we have changed the nutrient profile in our crops. Okay. Crops that need less water, right? This would be called drought resistant crops. And that's, that's a good thing for many reasons. I mean, we are going through water scarcity in lots of the world. So if we can grow crops with less water, that's great. Crops that don't bruise easily. Okay, I would love it if none of my apples ever had bruises. But at the same time, if I could grow an apple that never bruises, but it doesn't taste as good, that's a sacrifice. I'm not saying that that's the case, but sometimes when you modify one thing, it affects the properties of other things. And so you have to have a well-rounded piece of produce, okay? And then larger crops, and I'm going to show you an example of that. Let me show you what corn looked like when we first made it to the Americas. All right, so if you take a look at this picture, okay? Right here is what corn originally looked like. And then it has been bred and modified to get to what we eat today, right? So it used to be the top of like a piece of grass. It would look like maybe wheat. So we would just eat this. It has about 10 kernels or something like that, right? So this is amazing. This is what corn used to look like. And then over time, it was modified to become this. Now, this is a combination of efforts here. You can breed crops to do this, to change from this to this. It takes lots and lots of time, generations. Every season, you save the seeds from the biggest crop and you breed them together the next year to make bigger ones, and you save them and you continue that cycle and you push for the bigger crop and you select. Okay, it's artificial selection because humans are selecting the biggest crops and only planting the seeds from those crops moving forward. Okay, and then you can also genetically modify now. But we have had corn like this longer than we've had genetic modification in the lab. So this is a form of genetic modification, but it wouldn't be necessarily considered a genetically modified organism because it happened over generations instead of in a lab very quickly. And so, there's some debate there. We've been doing genetic modification outside of the lab for a really long time, and lots and lots and lots of genes have changed to get from this to this, okay? In the lab, we can change one gene in order to change one trait about a thing, okay? And we can change 5 genes to change 5 traits. And so which one's better? Changing hundreds of genes, changing 5 genes and getting the same result in a much shorter time? There's a lot of debate, and I just wanted to expose you to it so that you'd be aware of it and you can know what you're buying when you see these labels on your foods. Okay, so larger crops is another one. Okay, let's go through and back out to here. And then, so outside of foods, other things, we can make other goods. So we had medicines, we had foods. I'm going to put biofuels as an example here, biofuels. So there's a lot of research into other ways to make fuels to move away from our dependence on petroleum. Okay, so biofuels is one place where we could go. And if we can get bacteria to spit out fuel like they spit out insulin for us, that would be great. That would be a source of fuel for us. They could pull carbon dioxide from the air and spit it out as fuel. That would be amazing. Okay, and then experimental medical treatments is another place that GMOs are being used. And this can also be called gene therapy. And you can look that up if you want to, but we're in food chemistry right now, so we're going to focus on the food side. But just wanted to show you that GMOs are not just for food. Okay. Now we're just going to do some quick stats about GMOs and their use and their prevalence. So GMOs have been extensively adopted by farmers. And we're going to go through some statistics. From 1996 to 2013, the area of farmland with GMO crops changed from, and I'll give you a second to catch up there. The area of farmland with GMO crops changed from 4.2 million acres to 432 million acres. So over 100 times, I forgot my D there, over 100 times the acreage in just a 17-year period. In 2010, 10% of the world's cropland was planted with GMO crops. In 2010, 10% of the world's cropland was planted with GMO crops. By 2014, the US had GMOs for 94% of its soybeans, 96% of its corn, 93%, 96% was of its cotton, and 93% of its corn. So guaranteed, unless you have been super aware of GMOs and you purposefully buy everything organic and you avoid GMOs with all of your energy, I guarantee you have a lot of GMOs in you, on you, around you, all the time. So it's something that you might not have been aware of, but it's there and you're using it. And then we'll just do one more global statistic, and that will be the end of our notes. Globally, 54% of GMOs are grown in developing countries. 54% of GMOs are grown in developing countries. So, you know, the vitamin A rice is an example. In India, they grow genetically modified eggplant because, again, that one is a disease-resistant modification. There was a disease that was wiping out their eggplant crops, and so they started growing this genetically modified version. Okay. Now there is GMO resistance. There are people, again, on both sides. Is this safe? Has it been around long enough to know that it's safe? Things like that. And I can just tell you, in the science side, GMOs are extremely well tested, and they put a lot of money and research into their safety before they put them out to market. Whereas when you crossbreed things and you just continually generationally change the genes, those ways of changing genetics are not controlled, and they don't have a whole lot of testing with them. So it just kind of depends on your comfort with what science tests versus just modification over time and random chance changes that happen day to day in every organism. So that is the information about GMOs and organic foods, and you can submit both of those, and that is all we have for you today. So get caught up on anything that you're missing for the class, and we'll see you later.